afternoon, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Ellen Block, Director of Transfer Pricing and Tax Planning with Vertiv, and a member of CMC's Board of Trustees. Perfect. Speaking of sponsors, thank you to today's sponsor, Home Care Assistance. Today's live stream is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. Let's thank all of those supporting today's forum. Columbus is a welcoming, let's start over. Columbus is welcoming, progressive, and growing. But is it age-friendly? And by that we mean, is it the kind of city that will take care of its older residents and be attractive to new ones? Franklin County's population of adults age 60 and over is expected to double, between 2010 and 2050. In the United States, the number of adults age 65 and over is projected to be greater than the number of children under 18. Today, we will explore the hallmarks of age-friendly communities and see how Columbus and Ohio stacks up. Please welcome our delightful panel. We have Holly Holtzen, State Director of AARP Ohio, Katie White, Director of the Age-Friendly Innovation Center at The Ohio State University College of Social Work. It's a long, it's a long name. And our amazing host, Ms. Ursel McElroy, Director of the Ohio Department of Aging. You can learn more about today's speakers on your forum flyer. Ursel, we look forward to today's conversation.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you to the Columbus Metropolitan Club for inviting me to be a part of this quite important and timely conversation. May, I hear, is, I think, your membership month. It's also Older Americans Month. And this year, we highlight the value of aging in place, being intentional in our individual and collective efforts to explore the many ways older adults can remain in and be involved with their communities. Age My Way is the theme for 2022. And through today's discussion on age-friendly communities, we join the nation's observance of Older Americans Month and move us one step closer to making Ohio the best place to age in the nation. Yet foundational to creating age-friendly communities is reframing how we view aging and the healthy aging process. Ohio's Strategic Action Plan on Aging, or what we refer to as the SAPA, masterfully reframes our view and approach to aging with justice, equity, and well-being central to the plan. Following today's event, there will be a link shared by CMC where you can access this really critical document for the state of Ohio and helping us to be the best place to age in the nation. It was released in March of last year, and the SAPA highlights the link between social determinants of health and longevity, prompting us to rethink our approaches in policy making, service delivery, and investment priorities. Because of a well-planned design and implementation process, the SAPA's goal is within reach. And essentially with the SAPA, we want to help people live longer, healthier lives with dignity and autonomy. The SAPA will provide you with a comprehensive roadmap that requires public and private collaboration to improve outcomes for older Ohioans. Age-friendly communities are a great example of this type of collaboration. The SAPA, when you open it, has 19 outcomes that we're striving to achieve. Several of these are directly supported by age-friendly communities. Examples include housing quality and affordability, financial stability, transportation access, nutrition, physical activity, social inclusion, and more. The SAPA helps ensure that all of our partners within the aging network and beyond are rowing in the same direction to improve the health and well-being of older Ohioans. And so I'm really excited about today's discussion. I think today's discussion moves us to a place where we can ensure that everyone in our state and eventually across this nation can age with grace and dignity in the settings of our choosing and with rich and meaningful opportunities to contribute and thrive. So I hope you're all as excited as I am to get the discussion started. I'm going to start with you, Katie. You're the lucky one. Can you please describe for us what it means for a community to be age-friendly?
Sure. Thank you, Director McElroy. So simply put, is Columbus age-friendly community? Yes, we are, and I'll explain a little bit about why that is. To be an age-friendly community is to join a national and international network of communities that are dedicated to continual listening and improving. So the World Health Organization and AARP Livable Communities have this network. In order to join, you complete an application and you have your highest ranking elected official write a letter of commitment. You're committing to a 5-year process. The first year is assessment, the second year is planning, and then you implement that strategic plan. So in our case, Columbus joined this network in 2016. We completed our assessment, did our plan, implemented it, and it was with many community partners, so many that are in this room. But really the crux of our work is making sure that we're working side by side with older adults. We're listening to what their challenges are, we're listening to what their ideas are, and bringing together the right resources and partners to make those ideas a reality.
Well, thank you, Katie. Can you be, if you don't mind, since we're sitting right here in Columbus, can you talk to us a bit about some of the efforts currently underway or planned in Columbus or Franklin County?
Sure. So I'd first like to draw your attention, I think every table has one of our 5-year reports, and that will really detail the 36 action steps that we put into place in 2018, 19, and 20. And so as Dr. McElroy mentioned, Age Friendly looks at a number of areas. We call them domains. So transportation, housing, civic engagement. Again, all of our work is outlined there. What I'd like to speak about is sort of where we're going now. We last year launched the Age Friendly Innovation Center at Ohio State's College of Social Work. And so while we completed our first year cycle of improvement, and I'm biased, but I think we did a fabulous job, what's truly exciting is where we're going. And so I've got my colleagues here, Dr. Holly DeBelko-Shoney, who's our Director of Research at the Center, Marisa Sheldon, who's the Assistant Director of Interdisciplinary Engagement, many scholars from across the university and students and professionals that have done this. And so because of our successful first 5 years, we're really building on this trust and this reputation in our community that we get things done by listening and we get things done by working together. So you'll hear about our Central Ohio Regional Assessment on Aging being released on May 24th through a webinar. You might hear about our collaboratory, which is interdisciplinary scholars from across the university working together on research and promoting evidence-based work. You might even hear about our Scholars Program, which has been extremely successful in bringing together students and really adding that aging and accessibility lens to the next generation of leaders in the workforce. So those are some of our big ticket items coming up that I wanted to make sure you all knew about.
All right, so thank you, Katie. I want to make sure we get Holly in here, and this is for either of you, though. What are some of the elements of their communities that older adults say they want?
Sure. So in 2021, AARP fielded a study of home and community preferences, and it really focused on the needs and wants of all adults, 18 and older, with regards to housing, transportation, outdoor spaces, social engagement, and isolation. And what this survey revealed was that about 2/3 of all adults and about 80% of the 50+ want to stay in their current communities. Adults value good health, promote street safety. They want good opportunities for community engagement, and I think Director McElroy already hit on some of these things. So additionally, there were 2 areas, housing and transportation, that were also very important. We know that homeownership among adults 65 plus is at historic lows, and the number of renters amongst the 65 plus is expected to grow. So nationally, it's going to grow from 7.4 million to 12.9 million by 2040. So we know that high numbers of Americans want forever homes. They want to stay in their homes as they age. And this percentage is even higher for the 50 plus, with more than 3/4 wanting to remain in their home. But more aging in place modifications and technology are really needed. So 1/3 of all adults, so this is 18 and over, say they need to make modifications to their current residence, so either they can continue living there or a loved one can continue living with them. And some of the modifications include bathroom modifications, grab bars, no step showers. About 80% said they needed to make those modifications. About 70% said they wanted to make their home more accessible. They want to add emergency response systems and even add smart features like the camera doorbells, smart appliances, things like that. 65% place a high importance on home repair and home repair services for low-income older adults. And the majority have a high importance on having affordable, trustworthy home modification contractors, which is a huge deal in terms of making homes more accessible. And then in terms of transportation, driving is the most common mode of transportation for Americans. I'm sure we all drove here today. 9 in 10 adults drive themselves to get around in their community, and 90% of the 65 plus drive themselves. So some of the most important features that individuals want are well-maintained streets, easy-to-read traffic signs, accessible and safe streets, and enforced safe speed limits in their community. So all of these things are very important to what all adults are asking for.
So, Holly, I know AARP has supported age-friendly states and communities for some time. Can you explain why this movement is so important right now?
Sure. Director, is there anything specific to Columbus?
Yeah, I did want to add just a little
Absolutely.
something about that,
Yeah.
what we're hearing. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different spin on it and just sort of set up and explain how in our community and how we're training some other communities to do this type of work, to learn the things that you shared about. So one of the main things that we learn over and over and over again is that individuals want the choice, they want autonomy, and they want a place to feel that they're really respectfully heard. And so that's where I feel like our sort of special sauce of what we do, where we get things right. So what does that look like, this inclusive engagement? If somebody wants to participate in our local efforts, we do everything within our power to decrease barriers to participation. So for hosting an event at a space, we go there beforehand to make sure it's accessible. We look at things like, is there zero entry? Are the bathrooms accessible, right? We think about bringing in translators and interpreters to make sure that things are offered in multiple languages. Our font is always 14 point. If somebody needs transportation, we can help kind of coordinate and make that work. So what I think we've learned mostly through this is respectful, true engagement where you feel like your voice is heard and listened to and value. That's the big takeaway. And so I just wanted to put a little bit of kind of hometown flavor on some of those statistics.
I think that's appropriate, and I'm glad that you did that. And I guess reframing my earlier question, when you think about everything that many of us have come through, particularly in the last 2 years with the public health emergency, I think when you look at age-friendly communities now, how does that become even more so important during this time?
I'll take the first spin on it. So one of the big lessons or things that really stood out, particularly early on, was the need for broadband and high-speed internet access. Everything went virtual. I mean, it's nice to be live today, but I know this is being streamed. having access throughout the entire state, both in urban areas and in rural areas, was extremely important. And I know the state has taken some great steps to expand access, and there's a ton of federal resources, state resources, and grant programs ongoing to make that happen across the state.
So I understand that AARP maintains a livability index that scores states and communities on these services and amenities they offer. Can you describe what the livability index is and how Ohio and our communities rate?
Sure. So the AARP Livability Index scores neighborhoods and communities across the U.S. For the services and amenities that impact you the most. It uses 50 national sources of data and really provides the clearest picture of how well a community meets current and future needs of people of all ages, regardless of income, physical ability, or ethnicity. It features 61 different indicators, and it captures 7 critical categories: housing, neighborhood, transportation, environment, health, engagement, and opportunity. And it's measured on a scale of 0 to 100 to really inform residents, policymakers, stakeholders, and researchers about their communities. So AARP also factored in community size in this index, breaking it out by population. So we have large, mid-size, and small cities. And then for the first time, we did small towns. So how do we rate? Ohio's big three, the big three C's, Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati, all scored over 50, with Columbus coming in at 56 as a large city, Cleveland 57 as a mid-size, and Cincinnati at 59, also categorized as a mid-size. And one community here in Franklin County, Grandview Heights, is among the top 10 in our state. Yeah.
Can I add a little bit
Yeah.
about that? So the Livability Index is a really great tool for communities that are just getting started. It's a nice baseline, and it's data-driven, which will be, that question that you are hit with over and over again in the beginning, like, show us the statistics, show us the data. And so it's a really great tool to bring out into the community and say, here's how we fare against somebody in our county. Here's how we fare against someone in another state. But nobody, at least to my knowledge, is at 100, nor will they ever be, right? It's really sort of this information to motivate and inspire and to give you something to work towards, because at least the goal, from what I understand, is not that you get to 100 ever, but that you just kind of know where you are and can work towards some of those areas.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go ahead and step out here and ask the big question. So where do you think the state needs to go next? And we could start with Columbus, but I'm going to go ahead and ask the question. I'm ready to hear.
That's not in my notes. I don't know that I agree with that. Where do we need to go next? Okay, so the first thing I'll say is not going to come to any surprise. We need more funding in aging in general. Less than 1% of foundation funding go to things in aging. Most age-friendly communities are totally grant-funded, us included. So if you don't bring the money in, then you don't get to do the great work. And so we've got this great network of people that are really scrappy and good at writing grants. But for every 4 you write, maybe you get 1. So first and foremost, funding. Sorry, I did not pass that one through before I said it. But secondly, I think more integration into work that's already going on in communities across the state. So one thing that works really well for us, since we've been in this for almost 7 years, is that when you hear about big, cool projects going on, aging and age-friendly, we're at that table. So when you hear about Link Us, right, we're on a Link Us committee. When you hear about ODOT's work for safe driving and safe highways, we're on those committees. We were on the autonomous vehicle when it was in Linden and being tested. And so that's really, I think, what we're working towards hard here, and what can really benefit the state is integrating that aging and age-friendly network and lens into a lot of the infrastructure, into a lot of the policy and program conversations going on.
Yeah, I would agree. We need to continue to raise the profile. I mean, let's be honest with each other, we're all aging. This is important to everyone. And I know what we're seeing in the data, in the surveys, we want to stay in our communities. We want to make our communities great. And I want to give a little kudo to Director McElroy. Ohio has really taken big steps and has done tremendous work in this space. She talked about the SAPA and that foundational document as a roadmap. And it's not just a roadmap for state agencies, but for everyone. And there's also a toolkit on their website. So you can start getting involved and start helping implement these changes in your community. And if you're living outside of Columbus or Franklin County, there are options, and we are happy to connect you to the network to get more information. We're also really well positioned, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't mention this, to, as a state, join the network as a state with 10 other states, including Florida, who have also committed to this age-friendly concept and network. And throughout the state, we have 17 communities now, and it's growing almost every day. I'm getting an email. So we just need to continue talking about it and telling everybody why it's important, because they say it is.
Yeah, I'd like to say a little something about that. Okay, so in regard to the state, you are right, we are growing faster than ever before and more successfully, I think, and sustainably than ever before. And if I do say so myself, I think it's because of my colleagues and the other individuals across the state working on this, really joining together in an intentional way and forming what we call CAFCO, the Coalition of Age-Friendly Communities of Ohio. And that way, when you are learning something really important and that's working, or if you're part of a statewide approach for funding, you bring together all 17 of us and you've got that economy of scale, right? We've got a bigger voice, we've got a bigger impact. And so we're doing a really great job of working together. We did the nearly impossible, which is get data use agreements across 12 communities and how many, Holly? 5 universities. That in and of itself is major. And so we're thinking really wisely together about our growth, and I think that is going to make all the difference in this conversation about whether or not we become age-friendly Ohio.
So you mentioned integration. Can you explain how age-friendly communities work with the Aging Network? And for instance, what services and systems do you add to, build upon?
Sure. So the simplest way for me to explain this would be we're everywhere we need to be. So, or everywhere where somebody isn't. We're not meant to duplicate. We're not meant to be competition. But really, we're meant to show up where we're needed and add that extra support, that extra voice. We are lockstep with different, if it's the SAPA, if it's the ODOT plan, if it's our COAAA, local plan, we're always making sure that we are in line with those priorities and offering support and assistance as needed. One of the best ways to exemplify this is when COVID hit, right? So within, 5 hours of the first dispatch article about COVID being in our hometown, we had gathered up our community leaders and we said, who's doing what and where do we need to step in? And so it wasn't that we were overtaking any, all of it or any of it, but we were working with the elders we knew in the community, with the nonprofits, the settlement houses, the villages, and we were saying, what do you need from us and where can we show up? And we did that. And it was because we're an age-friendly community that we can really kind of continue to evolve and mend and be what our community needs from us.
I think we'll move to questions from our live stream and in-person audience. This is just a few minutes. If you have questions, please make your way to the microphone now. If you're watching online, please type your questions into the chat. Before we take audience questions, I do have one final question. Katie, can you wrap us up with a story from Columbus or Franklin County that you believe shows how age-friendly communities are successful and effective at what they aim to do?
Yes, I can do that. So I guess the story starts with a quote from one of our first Older Adult Advisory Council members. He said, when you give input, you want to see change. And we bring this up and talk about this all the time because this has influenced and inspired everything that we do. So that was in 2016, and it's 2022, and he is still showing up. When we have a focus group, when we have an advisory council, he's showing up and he's bringing his friends, and he's our champion and our advocate. And that's just one person. You know, we've engaged 16,000 over the last 6+ years, but I'm confident to say that that's his input and his experience is not unique. And so I think that is our story. We are in the community and we're listening, and that input does lead to real change.
All right. So it is CMC's longstanding tradition to take audience questions. Jane Scott of CMC is curating questions from today's live stream audience. And for our in-house audience, please join Jane at the microphone. Please keep your questions brief and to the point. So Jane, what is our first question, please?
Yes, thank you. And good panel, thanks. And we have a lot of questions, so I'll do one and then we'll turn it loose. How is Columbus doing in terms of our infrastructure changes? And I know the city has been looking at reviving or revamping the whole zoning plan for the city. I don't know where we are on that process. There may be some folks in the room that know, but as far as zoning restrictions and zoning guidelines for streets and timing on lights and building codes, are we keeping up? Are we doing a good job? And where should we be going with that?
Well, I assume this question is for me, but unfortunately, I don't really have a good pulse on the details to that level. But what I can say is, much to my point earlier, we are on a Vision Zero committee, and we are bringing older adults and people with disabilities to the table for those conversations. So to the best of our ability, we'll make sure that aging and accessibility lens is on the zoning and the housing, but I don't really have a detailed answer on that. I'm sorry.
I put wife and family first, and in doing so, I noticed that my wife's family lived about 20 years less than mine. So I took out a long-term care policy about 35 years ago and paid into it until, well, still I'm paying into it. Although when Mr. Trump took office, they started sending the checks back, and I inquired by the state Insurance Regulatory Commission what they could do about it. And they said, well, that they were written under Old English and they haven't done anything yet. Now, in Minnesota and other states, they have to set aside 85% of their premium on all insurance policies, especially health insurance, life insurance, long-term care policies, as is in your name. So if they fold up, it has to be in secure holdings to cover their expenses. Now, a whole bunch of other people, we had the premium policy. So theoretically, that they'd asked several times before, and I approved the increases. The other people that I used to eat breakfast in the morning, when I brought this up, they said, well, they did the same thing to us, and we sent an attorney down there to find out if there's anything to do about it. And he came back and he said, well, you won't see your money again. And so they asked why, and gave them the same answer they gave me, that they were written under Old English, and they no longer, terms no longer applied. This is not right. It's never going to be right, and I'm never going to let go of this. And that's happened under what it used to be my party was in power when it took place, but it's no longer my party. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
My name's Rachel Lustig. I'm with Catholic Social Services. I want to say thank you to this panel for your very hopeful tenor, but I also want to comment about Mr. Bell's story, because as somebody who provides direct service to many seniors in our midst, the increasingly complex and urgent needs of the people that we are serving is shocking even to the people who have worked at our organization for 40 years. We have not seen the level of 80-year-olds experiencing homelessness for the first time. Suicidal ideation of this level of intensity, the lack of home-based care. So as we look to help ourselves out of this crisis and emergency, what role can we play in working together to providing support to people like Mr. Bell and the thousands of people that we serve? Thank you.
So first, thank you for the comment and the question, and also to the gentleman prior. These are very complex issues. I agree with that. I would say that when I earlier mentioned the SAPA, I think what I don't want you to miss is that I said this is an opportunity for us to rethink our approaches, our policy-making processes, and where we invest. That's really important because what we understand is that many of these issues or complex problems that you're presented with and many others, perhaps, just perhaps, we could mitigate or lessen the burden if we were to invest earlier, more upstream issues. So when you talk about housing, that means being certain that we have adequate, safe, and affordable housing for older Ohioans. That means making certain that we have in place adequate nutrition, adequate access to health care, planning for financial stability. I heard a mention in his conversation or his comment around long-term care insurance, which there's a lot of discussion surrounding that. My point being that we have opportunities now. And so when you ask what can we do, obviously we have some immediate things to help people in their current state, but I'm of the mindset that there are things that we can do now for those coming behind us so that this doesn't snowball. We have the 6th largest older adult population in the nation. And so we have to become prepared. And simply responding to a crisis is not preparation, but strategizing based upon the data, based upon what we know works, investing in the places where we can have maximum impact. That is how we begin to address some of these very complex issues that I don't anticipate will necessarily abate anytime soon.
Hello, I'm Tricia Strahler. I'm with Life Care Alliance. And our mission is to keep people in their homes, especially those elderly and with disabilities, and those who are lower income. And one of the biggest challenges that we're having, particular for our services that are the home repair services that you mentioned, as well as our homemaker services and direct care services, is the availability of a workforce. So I would really like to hear what initiatives are happening and even how, we can become part of that discussion about how we can solve this workforce. I know a few years ago the insurance industry was facing similar situations where no one wanted to take up a career in insurance. And I know that the state jumped in and did a lot of workforce development around there. And I'm just curious if there's any comment as to what's to address that workforce issue. Thank you.
So I'm going to guess that's mine too. So this is a twofold issue, and pardon me for simplifying it to 2 tracks, because actually it's complex within each of those tracks. We have an immediate crisis right now where we have to stop the bleeding. We have critical shortages within our workforce space, particularly with direct care. And so how do we address that? I will say that we've been fortunate to be able to, in the short run, provide substantial provider relief. But that only addresses the issue right now. We also understand that with this population growing, we understand with the needs that are out there, that we have to build a career ladder that we can rely upon in the future. And so there's a lot of work happening locally, at the state level, and even federal. We're working with our federal partners to see how can we build a bench, if you will, in these careers. So certainly, if you're interested or others offline, certainly happy to talk more about what our plans are and what we're trying to move toward. But we're listening, we're taking really good feedback, and we're hopeful that some of the strategies that we want to move forward on will make a difference.
Hi, Ann Gabriel, Ohio University. I'm retired. This, I think, now has become a kind of a follow-up to your last statement. So I'm an accounting professor, so let's talk economics. So how can we pay our in-home professional caregivers a competitive wage and at the same time keep the cost of service affordable to even those with low incomes?
That what you said precisely is the challenge. And I'm going to go even a bit further. That is why, and I have to say this again, I continue to hit this document. The approach that we have right now is one based upon individuals who have advanced care needs, individuals who generally will have to spend down the majority of their assets to be able to access care. What we're saying is that we know that 80% of what we see is modifiable if, in fact, you are able to invest in the right things early enough. And so our model where we just continue to respond to the crisis or the decline speaks volumes about how we even view aging. Aging can be a very healthy process, one that focuses on longevity and quality of life, not just loss and decline. And our models, our approach, our financing is based on what I would call a very outdated model. And so this is what we're attempting to say here. And in addition to this, I would also suggest that we will share with you our summary assessment, so you can know how you fare within each of your respective zip codes in this state. But your question is a great one, and it's one that we're grappling with right now. In fact, we're even having conversations with the Department of Labor, trying to figure out how do you create in-demand jobs, because that's really what this is about, and it turns into careers, but still keep the price at such a level that these systems that support these services will remain solvent. And that is what we're trying to work through.
Hi, I'm Lori Wengard, Home Care Assistance. We happen to know, our company talks a lot about that as we age, 2/3 of how we age, how well we age, is due to the choices that we make. So I'm pretty familiar with the SAPA, and I would love to hear some feedback from all of your organizations on how you're making sure you're not just taking care of older adults, but you're allowing older adults, you're empowering them to have access to the nutrition and the activity and the social ties, and how you're encouraging them to do so.
Do you want to start? One of you? Or?
Sure, I'll go ahead. So while we don't do direct service with Age Friendly, we certainly play a role in gathering information and informing individuals that do, and different programs and policies. So in terms of food access and maybe digital equity and transportation, one of the most important contributions that we have is our local assessment, so the Central Ohio Regional Assessment on Aging. That'll come out again on May 24th. But that's, I think, our best contribution is to say, here's what the data is telling us, here's what older adults in our community are saying are a challenge or what they can't access. Do either of you want to add that?
Okay. Well, I will say for the Department of Aging, we rely considerably on our area agencies on aging, they are the front door across the state, what we refer to as our Aging and Disability Resource Network. And so they are able to hear the concerns. They are able to, through their local planning, help us in decision-making and help us understand, based upon the assessments they've done, the surveys they've done, what is it that people really want and need. And so a lot of what we rely upon at the Department of Aging is our network, our 12 area agency on aging that cover the entire state. So that's how we are able to gauge.
May I add one thing? Sorry.
Yes.
Changed my mind. One thing to remember with AARP, we represent the 50+, and when we say that, we truly do. We have 38 million members across the country and 1.5 here in Ohio, and we regularly ask, what do people want? What are they looking for? And provide, we don't do direct service, like similar to Katie, but we do provide access to a lot of resources, education on a variety of topics, from caregiving to fraud prevention, and all the topics in between. So it's something that, we're listening. And one of the great things, turning it back to age friendly, is what's great about the network is this is driven by the community. This is what they're asking for, and they're helping implement. So we're not imposing anything on community members.
I'm John Lowe. I am eligible for Medicare, and unfortunately, and it's well covered with an Advantage program. Unfortunately, I get about 7 or 8 phone calls every day from people who want to help me with Medicare. And they're from people who call themselves Sam, whose dialect does not sound like they're actually Sam. They have phone numbers that sound like they're just down the street from me. I'm pretty sure they're not. I get a number of other robocalls about other things too. I'm not normally a volatile person, but I've started to yell at these people. And as soon as I yell at them, of course, they hang up. I try to get on do not call list. I don't understand the whole system. I don't know if anybody's looking into it, trying to do anything about it. Hopefully AARP might be interested, because it's truly annoying. It disrupts life in many ways. So can any of you comment about this?
I'll start with one small comment that I think it's a really valid point, and not only is it disruptive, but it could be potentially really harmful if they're able to, trick people into sending money or something like that. But I'm assuming that AARP, and you'll talk about the Attorney General's office, so I'll let you guys have that.
Yeah. So AARP does offer a lot of resources about Medicare, and as I mentioned, fraud prevention. So I would love to talk to you and connect you to my staff after this session. We can kind of connect you to some resources as well.
I think they've covered it. This really is a gateway into potential frauds and scams, and so there are a lot of resources that we'd be happy to share around both the Ohio Attorney General's office and also resources we have at the Department of Aging.
Great. So this question is from Emily Long. Have you heard anything from the community about how the housing market is impacting Columbus's older adults? And then I have a follow-up question, so.
I'll go ahead and start. Hello, Emily, out there in virtual world. She was a student with Age Friendly at one point in time. So, great question. And actually, for those that haven't seen, we recently put out a report that we did with the Franklin County Auditor's Office. And I thought there he is, okay. Auditor Cinziano is here. We heard from community members and from partners that there were fears around the increasing property taxes and property values. And this is a great example of what Age Friendly can do. We can lean in and take a deep dive and understand that. So there are worries around affordability of housing. We know that more older adults are aging with mortgages and with less savings than ever before. And so while everyone really wants to age in place, we've got some big challenges facing us in their ability to do that. So take a look at that report. It's just based on Franklin County, but a lot of really good information about home ownership, property values, property taxes, and different programs available as well.
Yeah, and also looking at, the rental market, making sure we have affordable rentals that are appropriately designed so you can age in place, whether you rent or own, is something we really need to think about. And to keep in mind, even if you own your home, less than 1% of the homes were designed with universal design in mind. So going back to that modification and, rehab question, we really need to think about that here in Columbus as well.
I have one more thing to say about that, sorry. So when we think about protecting the ability for older adults to age in place, whatever that might be, and working together to get that, it's not only because it's their choice, but also when we take a step back and look at the housing continuum in Columbus and in Franklin County, we don't have a lot of options between staying in your home and, unfortunately, to Rachel's point earlier, facing homelessness. If you want to or you have to leave your home, there might not be a house out there that is an affordable housing option or that has a value. And maybe there are affordable housing units available, but actually you're quite lower income than would qualify or be able to do that. And so it is a question of both transformational change and looking at things really big, but also having really swift conversations and hopefully funding for some incremental things so that we don't have a vast number of older adults aging in their home and then kind of bypassing all these other options that they would want right into a situation where they're facing homelessness.
So Katie, you touched on this, but let's dive a little deeper. We're blessed in Columbus that a lot of our neighborhoods are being transformed. I mean, you think of Franklinton. And as they're transformed, people who have lived there for a long time, whether they're older people or, middle age, they're facing increased property values, not because of anything that they've done necessarily, but because we've improved their neighborhood. At one point, I heard rumblings that there might be some legislation that would freeze property taxes at a certain level or a certain age. Have you heard anything about that? And is that a reality, or was I dreaming that?
It's a very good dream. I dream that too. I don't know of current rumblings, but I think we're setting the foundation by having the conversations and gathering the data, and really starting to say this is a problem at this other end of the spectrum, again, that the individuals facing homelessness. So I don't know of anything currently going on right now, but I think we'd love to see something like that happen.
There's conversation, which I think is a great start, and to really think about how to structure this to impact the folks who need it the most is something we need to really consider.
Okay, I'm Meg Tieford. I wanted to ask Katie specifically about the sidewalk surveys that she worked on. I remember that people were going out and looking at them, and now that you say I have a walker, I really am very sensitive about sidewalks and their condition. So has the city picked up, and what are we doing about making that built environment more accessible and easier to use?
I'm having a flashback to 2004 when I wasn't paying attention in class and you called on me anyway. No, I'm just kidding. So in all seriousness, there is a lot of work and advocacy going on around walkability and making sure that sidewalk conditions are updated. It's also a fine little dance and balance, if you will, because sidewalks are the homeowner's responsibility. What you don't want to do is start going around and making individuals that might be lower income or older themselves responsible for paying for really expensive sidewalk updates. So one of our approaches, in addition to being on Vision Zero and doing a lot of walk audits, is to think about it in sort of a modified way. While I wish every place in the city had a really accessible sidewalk connecting it to everywhere, that is not financially possible right now. But the second best thing we could do is make sure that people do know the accessible routes to where they need to go so that they can make informed decisions on how to get there. But it'll be an ongoing challenge for sure around the sidewalk walkability. But what we've learned over the years is one of the best things to do is a walk audit. And so we do continue to do those with individuals of all ages and abilities.
And I'll just make a really quick plug. We have toolkits and guides on the AARP website as part of our network and the support we provide to communities about how to do a walk audit, and all of the information is there, and be happy to share that with you.
Hi there, I'm Danielle Godby with Golden Reserve. I work with seniors in or near retirement to help them protect their homes and other assets from the cost of long-term care. When I talk to these people, I'm overwhelmingly aware of the fact that they just don't know what resources are available to them. I think it's something like 70% of people who are single will need long-term care at some point in their lives. One person in a married couple is upwards of 90% likelihood that that person will need long-term care. And yet most people that I speak to have no plans to how they can pay for it or how to finance it. Huge problem, right? So I guess my question is, are there any initiatives or resources out there how we can make people more aware of what's available to them?
I feel like I'm a commercial. Within here, no, and seriously, if you actually go into the online version, there are links that take you to really good information to show you where we are and what some of those options could be. It's just a part of I think a bigger thing where, for whatever reason, people don't see themselves as aging or sort of put their hand up. There is an alternative. I'm going to choose aging. And we do try to explain to people the importance of preparing. And I think that's what you're talking about, preparing. And it has been just an amazing and interesting dynamic when I broach the topic of aging with many people. But you're correct. But the SAPA does have a lot of those resources within there.
Thank you.
So I'm looking, I'm looking at a lot of neighbors who are widows or widowers, and they have huge houses. Are there efforts and programs that connect people so that perhaps there can be roommates or cohabitating or any kind of joint home ownership for folks who are ending up with these big houses and want to stay in that home, but it's really silly for them to live in a 5,000 square foot house by themselves?
Two things. So first of all, there's a program locally called Nesterly, and it does that. It's a home sharing program where it matches an older adult and a younger individual to home share. It's open to people of all ages, but it's sort of meant to have this intergenerational connection. Where zoning and code and rules allow for it, one really interesting tidbit is that the Airbnb hosts, the vast majority of Airbnb hosts are individuals that are 50 and older, and so thinking about your house as a way of earning income is another idea.
And I'd like to add to that. So there's a bigger conversation that needs to happen about our housing stock and what we're building. So more than half of all households are only 1 and 2 individuals. But our housing stock that we are currently, building, putting out there, has 2 or more bedrooms. So really adapting how we're thinking about that. And then also another thing to think about in terms of also, sharing, creating accessible dwelling units and thinking about if that could be a possibility here in Columbus and in Ohio. So maybe your loved one that you're caring for could live in that unit, or more along the lines of the sharing. So there are lots of policy options and things to think about.
So this has been a great discussion. On behalf of Katie and Holly, I do want to say I wish we had more time. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Ellen for closing remarks. Ellen.
Back. Well, I hope you guys found today's forum informative and interesting. I know I certainly have learned a lot, and I've realized that I have some personal decisions that probably need to be more informed, because apparently I am aging, as we all are, and being prepared is most important. So please make plans to join us next Wednesday for Vista Village, More Than a Home, with another terrific panel. Thank you to today's sponsor, Home Care Assistance. Thank you to our online virtual seat patrons and to the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation, and for our presenting our live stream in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. And special appreciation to today's speakers, Holly Holtzen, Katie White, and our host, Director McElroy. Thank you all for joining us. We could not do this without you. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at the Columbus Metropolitan Club presents another community conversation. Thank you.